Hi everyone, a very good evening. I welcome you all to the Dare Act Conversation series. Our endeavor with the series is to bring forward stories of lawyers who've dared to act differently by choosing unconventional career paths. Our guest for today is Janisha Shah. She works for the Ministry of Economy and Finance, Djibouti, as a legal and policy advisor. Now, from doing her LLB in India to pursuing Masters in Law and Economics in Europe, and then going ahead and doing her MA in Economics, and then working with the Oxford Policy Fellowship Program, her journey has been quite a ride, but an exciting one. So let's get her on board, and she's joining us live straight from Djibouti, Africa.
Hi, Shreya.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to join us for the Dare Act series. What time
Yes.
is it in Djibouti?
So it's 2:30 in the afternoon.
And we hope you've had your lunch.
I have.
You're all set.
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Amazing. So we're all very excited to know about your journey from India to Africa, but let's break it down and let's go
Sure.
10 years back and tell us what made you choose law. How was your college experience, and were there any eye-opening or aha moments that you had in those 5 years of college?
Well, okay. So to begin with, that's pretty long back, but I can tell you that, for me to choose law was partly by choice and also it was partly by elimination. So I always knew that I was good at writing. I enjoyed reading, and I always had this strong sense to tell, say, right from wrong. Okay, and back then I had this conventional ideas of what lawyers did, which is to argue, say, passionately in courts. And obviously, like the 15-year-old me was pretty oblivious to the amount of work that goes behind these arguments. So yeah, that was my reason to pick law. Okay, I'm not sure if you're still there, but
It's fine. Yeah,
it
it's okay.
yeah, okay, because it just shows me that it's rotating. But it was also partly by elimination because I knew I was bad at math, and I wanted to do something in law, so to say. So I picked it that way, and I thoroughly enjoyed my 5 years in college. I think like at GLC, I did almost everything that I possibly could as a law student. So I did moot court competitions. I participated in several committees. I made some excellent friends, and I also did all these internships. So for me, GLC was like 5 years of a lot of fun and learning as well.
Wonderful. And what was your take about law when you joined college? Did you still have the same notions about what you thought a lawyer should be like, or what they do in general about their work?
No, so like I mentioned, right, back then I thought that for me, law was, lawyers going to courts and arguing. And I did not realize that there is so much work that goes behind allowing lawyers to go and argue. And that there's so much more that goes behind the scenes. So, yes, for me, that changed. And I also, like, through those 5 years, I also got introduced to several other things that lawyers do, which is not just say go to courts, but also say work in corporate law firms, and they have other sort of careers that they could pursue. So this is something that I learned through those 5 years by interning in different, say, law firms, and also just meeting people who are doing other things.
Beautiful. And so, one thing that I was told, and it would have been probably a bad advice, I don't know, I was told was that don't have too many jumps. It shows on your resume, and it's often something that's looked at as bad, when someone's hiring you. However, you've done some really
I'm
daring
so
stuff.
sorry, Shreya. I can't hear you at all. So you'll have to repeat yourself. I really hope I hear
Okay,
you this
am
time.
I am I audible now? No?
Yes, it's still breaking, but you can try.
Okay, I'm gonna go slow in that case because here I can see you perfectly.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll just like try to decipher what you're saying and answer.
Okay, so what I wanted to ask is that after graduating, you worked in a corporate law firm, then you moved
Yeah,
in-house, and then you moved to Europe
yeah,
to pursue your LLM, and we'll get to the Oxford Fellowship shortly. The
yeah.
moves, I'm sure there must have been certain deciding factors behind those specific moves. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for sure, like the thing is, I was working with a boutique law firm in my final year in college, and I also got placed with the same law firm. And very soon into, working full time, that is after I graduated, I realized that this was something that conflicted with, what I thought of what I wanted to pursue in the long run. And so I gave up on that, and working in house is just something that came up, and it was an opportunity that I took up, and I'm so happy I did that because for me it was an excellent experience. I was working on diverse legal matters, so say from handling the company's litigation to also looking at banking and finance, and also for instance, I got introduced to say PPP work, that is public private partnerships, while I was working in house. And this was invaluable because today I advise the ministry in Djibouti on PPP policies as well. So that was my experience, working in house. And then when I felt that I had some amount of experience there, and I was pretty much done with, is when I decided that I wanted to pursue my LLM, and that's when I moved to do that.
To that. Wonderful. And when you when you decided that you wanted to do LLM, was it with a larger goal in mind? Did you have something in mind, or at that moment it just felt right, so you went ahead? Okay,
Sorry,
am I
Shreya,
audible?
again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so what I asked was that when you made that choice to pursue LLM, was it with some larger
Yeah.
goal ahead in mind, or it just you just wanted to study further? Did you have something in mind that time?
No, so I think like it's well known, right, that you don't really do an LLM to have better job prospects, because 5 years in law is mostly enough for you to secure a good job. And for me, that was that. I knew that I was doing an LLM, but it was with an intention to have different perspectives. It was with an intention to have a wholesome experience, to also be introduced to say academics outside of India, and it was with this goal that I pursued my LLM. So yeah, I had that intention in mind.
Okay, amazing. And tell us a bit about. So I'm assuming after LLM is when you came back to India and you filled up for the
Yeah.
Oxford Policy Fellowship Program, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So tell us a bit
So
about that. Yeah, tell us a
mhm.
bit about the policy program and how it fell into your lap. Like, I mean, I didn't even know there was something that existed. So tell us a bit about the fellowship program and what does one have to do to get into a program like this one?
Sure. So I think, like for me, the Oxford Policy Fellowship is not something that just came about. I had finished my masters and I had returned to India, and almost organically and naturally, like without thinking, towards the end of my masters, I had started applying for law firms, and because that is what I had in mind. That's what you do. You do your LLM, and you come back to India, and you apply to law firms, and you work in say tier 1 law firms, because you also have certain return on investment that you need to do. So that was what I thought I was supposed to do when I got back, and I did that. But fortunately for me today, and unfortunately back then, none of that really worked out. And that is something that compelled me to, introspect, to understand, and to actually decipher what it is that I liked doing, and what it is that I would want to pursue in real, and, not something that I was supposed to do. So I took a lot of time to figure that out. I think I just gave myself that time to understand what I'd want to do next. And that is when I realized one thing. I really enjoyed my time while I was studying abroad, because it was one bustling year. I studied in 3 different countries, so it was not really that comfortable as well. And I was frequently exposed to, say, situations and circumstances which were really different. And I thought that for me, that is when I actually thrived. I thrived in those situations. I felt that I had so much to grow and to learn from when I was exposed to such situations as well. So I had that in mind. And at the same time, I also knew that I wanted to do something in policy drafting and policy advisory work. So that was something that I also kept in mind, and I applied for the Oxford Policy Fellowship because it seemed like something which was really good. But I applied for it and I forgot about it, right? Because A, it was extremely competitive, and B, because it is an extremely long process as well. So I applied from the time that I first applied to say when I got to know that I was posted in Djibouti was a 7-month gap. and it's not like I couldn't be doing anything for those 7 months. So, of course, I applied to several other non-for-profit consultancies. I even took up a stint, with an immigration officer, in the meantime. So I did all these things in the meantime while I was also appearing for different stages of interviews for the policy fellowship, because it's really long. And with every stage that I cleared, I became more and more hopeful about the fellowship working out for me. And I was really happy because eventually it did, and it did materialize, and here I am in Djibouti.
Wow, that's quite a ride. As much as I really appreciate the fact that you held it on all together, because, once you do your LLM, you come back somewhere down the line. For a lot of us, there is this pressure, all my friends are working, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not getting a job. Did you have similar fears or insecurities, or that's not something that you just handle it really well? Did you
No,
have your
no, of
share?
course I did, like I told you. Yeah, yeah, obviously. That was definitely a big part of, what I felt when I did come back from my master's, because like I told you, I almost organically applied to law firms because I thought that that's what everybody does after they finish their LLM. And because I felt that I took this time out to actually introspect, to understand very well what it is that I'd like to do, I am in a place where I enjoy the work I do. So obviously, it's not something that felt very right back then, because there were so many uncertainties, right? Like, say the fellowship didn't work out for me, then I'd have to look for something else, and I would have to make things work in other ways. So obviously, I had my share of fears. There was a lot of uncertainty as well, but I'm really glad that in retrospect, I held on to what I wanted to do in the long run, and not just like get into something because I was supposed to do that, or because everybody else who had just finished their LLMs were doing the same thing. So that was that. And at the same time, Shreya, I felt like I always knew that law was my calling. So I knew that it's not something that I wanted to give up on. And I wanted to hold on to, say, working as a lawyer or in the legal field, because I enjoyed that. I had studied it, and it's something that I liked. So I knew I wanted to hold on to that, but at the same time also use what I knew and my skill sets in different environments, and to do work which was impactful. Because at the end of the day, I realized that when I do some work in which has a positive impact on the people that I'm working for, it was extremely satisfying. So I was looking at, say, non-for-profit organizations as well.
Wonderful. Tell us this fellowship, what is the main aim of this fellowship? Why is it there? And also, how many people got selected in your batch?
So the aim of the fellowship is to deploy lawyers. So these are basically, all of us are lawyers, and we're deployed in different sub-Saharan African countries and in different ministries in these countries. And our end objective entails to fill the gap between, say, the local ministry, the people working there, and the legal know-how that we can bring as having been trained in, say, other jurisdictions. So because these are low and middle income countries, the local staff here isn't as well equipped as you may need for a government to function in a certain manner. So this is where we come in, and we provide that sort of legal technical know-how. And at the same time, it also entails capacity development initiatives. So as to say that, today when I work with the ministry, it's not that I just do my work and then I finish my 2 years and I go away. I must reflect upon the time that I've spent here and the capacity that I've built locally in Djibouti to enable the people here to work in a way that, they were working while I was here, even after I have left. So, that is the end objective of the fellowship. And you also asked me something else, which I can't recall.
Yeah. So in the year when you pursued the fellowship, how
Yeah.
many people got selected, and
So
how
we
many
were
people got
we were 10 of us.
10
So
of
there
you?
were a total of about 179 applications. And at the end of like all these rounds, we were 10 fellows who were shortlisted for different countries.
Did you get to choose the country, or No.
No, no, no. I had no choice in the country. So that's what happens, right? So I got shortlisted for the fellowship, and then the fellowship goes on to different countries, different sub-Saharan African countries, with our CV, and it speaks to different ministers and different ministries within these countries to understand where it is that we as a fellow could contribute the most. And once they've identified where it is that we can work for the long run, or where it is that they can benefit from our expertise, is when they make this match. So I may be, shortlisted for the fellowship, but it isn't necessary that ministry picks me. So, there has to be a complete match in both ways.
Wonderful. I remember, so I knew you had French as your subject in junior college. School is when you studied it. And while we were in
Yeah.
college, you were pursuing some international certification in the French language. Did that help in any way, in your career trajectory so far?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, okay, so I studied French in school, which was almost negligible, but then I did take up additional French language lessons at Alliance Française, which gives you certification for the language. And so I pursued that while I was in junior college in Bombay, because you don't really study so much in those years. It was just as a hobby. And I also did a cultural exchange program while I was in GLC for a month. And I think that really helped me get into the vibe of the language and to acquire a sort of fluency to be able to speak in the language and to understand it much better. So that is something that happened while I was in college. And then Djibouti was an ex-French colony. So here the official language is French, and I think I can quantify it. 85% of the work that I do is in the French language. So it's also quite a lot of the work that I do which happens to be in French. And I believe that I was picked as a right fit for this country, mostly because I knew French. Because without that, there is no way that I could have possibly worked or done or contributed to the work that happens at the ministry here.
Absolutely. And it's such an epic example to make you realize that just keep doing what you're doing, because it's only in the hindsight you'll know how all the dots get connected, right? It's
For
amazing.
sure.
So tell us, in terms of the work that you do, the role that you play, what does your daily work life entails? What is it that you actually do at work?
So, in terms of the work that I do, there are three components. There is the legal side of it, there's policy, and also there's capacity development, which I've already touched upon. So, when it comes to legal, there is international contracts that we work on. So, I advise on them. I draft legal opinions for these contracts. There are international treaties which the government signs with other nations. So that's one aspect of the work I do. What's also really interesting is, I can think about this. While I was working in house, I was working on loan agreements between the company and a bank. And here I am working on loan agreements between Djibouti as a country and another country. So for me, that was a great experience because it's such a broad perspective that I attained while working on a national level here within the ministry. So that's one aspect of the work I do. I also work on policies. So when it comes to policies, I work on policies of national importance, and they're not just economy and finance related, because I work in the Ministry of Economy and Finance, but because we have a dedicated legal department within this ministry, we get dossiers and policies to work from, say, the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Energy, and also, say, different things from the Ministry of Labor. So there are these different subjects that I get to work on when it comes to the policy aspect of the work that I do. And lastly, there is capacity development. That is, that I never really do an assignment all by myself. So when I am working at the department, I'm always working with another staff within the ministry who is a local civil servant within the department.
Wow.
And my aim while working with the person is to be able to transfer my knowledge base, to be able to train them in the time that I'm here, to be able to do this work as effectively once I have left. So that is the components of the work that I do.
I'm assuming that's the most fulfilling part of your work, right? Truly
No,
impacting.
certainly yeah, because I feel really happy about the fact that I know that the work that I'm doing has a certain net positive impact at the end of the day. I know that I'm doing some work which contributes positively to the lives of the people here. So for me, all of these things are extremely important. And like I told you before, that while I was working in the law firm, I had certain ethical conflicts, and I felt that this is not what I studied law for. So for me, that is being fulfilled through the work that I do here.
Beautiful, amazing, Janisha. When I think of you as a person, because I know you personally, you're born, brought up Bombay. You gelled very well in the environment of Europe, and of course, you have a flair for French. So when you went for an exchange program to France, you fit in so well with the people there as well. And then Djibouti happened, which is in fact, a step backwards to India when it comes to actually being one of the least developed countries, in terms of status. And I'm very certain you must have had your share of challenges and learnings, be it professional, be it lifestyle, culture, or even personal to that aspect. Can you share some of those with us? And if there are any anecdotes you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. So, like you rightly said, right? We're from India, not just India, but I come from Mumbai. So it's you're exposed to say the modern side of things, but at the same time, you're also culturally sensitive to a lot of other aspects of what life in India entails. And then when I moved for my master's in Europe, it was fairly easy because yes, it was way more modern. It was much more advanced when it came to say mindsets, but it's easier to make that transition to come from India and to go to a more modern sort of a society. Though I do remember, being in Netherlands and trying and feeling really stupid when I couldn't understand how this machine works for me to be able to buy groceries. Okay, so that happened, and I remember using contactless debit cards, so that and thinking, oh, this is so cool. So going from that aspect of being really feeling really cool about these things to coming to Djibouti, where it's an almost all cash economy. I can't use my cards anywhere at all, is a big transition because like so many things that happen here daily remind me of what India was, say, 10 to 15 years ago. So to give you examples, when I just came into Djibouti, Djibouti has a monopoly on telecom. So, this telecom office here wasn't working, and it took me over a week to just get a SIM card issued. So things work that slowly. And to give you other examples, it's just so the population here, okay, in Djibouti is majority. It's about 95% Muslim, and they're quite traditional when it comes to their religious beliefs. So, for instance, I once invited a friend, like a colleague of mine, to come for after work drinks with me, and I was aware that she doesn't consume alcohol, so that was okay with. But the next day at work, I asked her if she had a good time and if she would like to come again, and she told me, "But Janisha, we're not supposed to even be in places where they serve alcohol." So for me, that was a big learning because I realized that I wasn't exposed to that side of the culture. That is, uh, another example would be that during our work hours, there are at least 3 times that I witness my colleagues take breaks for prayers. So I have to even respect that boundary while I'm working there. I don't dress up the way I would while I was in India or in Europe. I'm usually fully covered while I'm here. So that is another aspect. So there are these different things that I experience on daily basis, which which makes me realize how different this is, and it also brings so. For instance, it has also made me very conscious about not taking things for granted. Um, in Djibouti, it's so hot that it supports absolutely no agriculture. So we don't have any local produce here. Okay, and everything that we get from, say, fresh produce, vegetables, is all imported. So I have to plan my meals for the entire week over the weekend because I get fresh vegetables only 2 times a week. So I have to plan, okay, this Thursday I'm going to get this vegetable, so this is what I'll be able to cook. So like a week in advance to accommodate for these things, which are really, which aren't exactly easy. They're challenging, but at the same time, I think it has really helped me appreciate a lot of things back home and stuff that we take so for granted.
so for granted. And I'm just hearing this is giving me goosebumps because we're just so used to being taken care of, right? And here you get vegetables twice a week and you have to figure out your way all around that
Yeah.
schedule. But I can see that you fit in really well and you've kind of molded yourself to the way this country functions. So tell me what you love about Djibouti.
So there's a lot I love about Djibouti. Uh, so the life here is really peaceful, and for instance, I come back home from work at around 4:35 every evening, and I get to see the sunset by the beach every day. For me, that is really big. It's really important to be able to live in that way because, say, I just don't want to have this experience professionally. Of course, I'm growing professionally, and there's so much for me to learn there. But at the same time, I feel that I need to grow personally, and I need to have these experiences while I'm, back outside of work as well. So for me, that is extremely important, and the work in Djibouti allows me to have that time to myself to pursue a lot of other things. At the same time, I meet amazing people in Djibouti because there's a lot of international development work that goes on here. So there are people working in different UN agencies, and they do excellent work because say Yemen from Djibouti is really close, and a lot of work, international aid work that happens in Djibouti happens for Yemen. So you meet all these people who've lived in the war zone, who've lived in Djibouti, who've contributed to this sort of international development work, and you hear these stories from them, and you realize there's so much that people do which you're completely oblivious to, and it makes me also want to do the sort of work that can contribute to bettering people's lives. So for me, that has been extremely you know it's it's brought a sort of self-awareness to understand what I want to do better or what I want to do next.
Amazing. And if I was to ask you if there was one change you would really want to bring about in be it the legislation or some policies or certain rules and regulations which you think you can improve and which has not been done, what would that one change be?
So I think, Shreya, that in terms of the technical expertise that I bring to the work in the ministry, obviously there's a lot that I bring in terms of the work that I do. But if there is one thing that I would change in terms of the way things function, would be to bring about a sort of motivation in my colleagues. So it wouldn't really be, say, in a technical legislation sort of a way, but I would really love it that, if at the end I have sort of motivated my colleagues to be able to take on these tasks themselves and to incentivize. Obviously, this doesn't happen without the right incentives in place. So I would be really happy if I were to say motivate them to be able to work with the same kind of motivation that we've been working for the past year or so. So for me, that is one change that I would bring, and then I'd be like, okay, things will function and
My
changes
work
will
is
be
done. My work is done here.
yeah.
Amazing. And so if there was a piece of advice that you could give to kids that are pursuing law at the moment and they don't know what they want to do, after 5 years, or somebody who may be wondering if international development is something they may want to consider, what would be your advice for them?
So I think it's really important to be flexible. Okay, so not the Seema Taparia Indian matchmaking way, but to be flexible in the sense that to be aware that there's so much out there that we don't know about. Okay, so if I would have if I studied law with the sort of idea that okay, I want to pursue this particular branch of law always, I wouldn't have ever been able to accept or to even get to know about the different things that are there out. There's so much out there that we don't know about. So to be flexible to accommodate all that comes your way and to give everything a fair chance. So the worst case scenario for me had I come to Djibouti with would have been that I come here and I hate the work. But then at the end of the day, even if that were true, I would have at least realized what it is that I don't want, and that also in itself is a big learning, right? So it's very important to be, say, accommodative to what is there, to be modest to say that, okay, we don't know what we can do with the skill sets that we have, and to be open to use this for different things. So I really like the idea of the DARE Act as well, because it does exactly that, right? You know that you have studied law, but there is so much more that you can also do with it. So that's one thing. And for international development, I think you need to have the motivation to be able to work for motives which are selfless. So if you have that in place, when you know that you want to do work which has a certain impact, you will find your way. So there's a lot of work which happens even in India at grassroots levels. There are several fellowships, several programs which cater to exactly this sort of work, which is say development nationally. And once you've acquired that sort of an experience, there's always scope for you to bring that outside of your country. So for me, this fellowship was an opportunity to do that directly. But if I were to say in retrospect, think, okay, I want to, join this field henceforth, then I would, of course, first try to build that sort of base within the country to work in the development sector within India, and then see what I can do or bring about outside. So yeah, that's about that.
Brilliant, so well articulated. And also, what I noticed is that we're often given advice that we should work hard and improve on our weaknesses. But what you truly did was you focused on the strengths and the qualities that you had, and that actually helped you pave your way very easily. And that's such a great insight, because there are such there's certain things that we are conditioned as kids that actually don't serve us anymore. And I'm so glad that you've been so honest with us on the show today. And I really hope this conversation leads to certain eye-opening moments for a lot of viewers who may be contemplating what they want to do after the degree. So thank you so much, Jenny, for being a part of this show.
Thank you so much, Shreya, for having me.
So the Grey Matter is building a community of lawyers who've dared to act differently, and we really appreciate you being a part of that community. So thank you once again to all our viewers. We really appreciate the fact that you turn up every Friday sharp at 5 o'clock. In fact, it's motivating for us also to have these conversations and create whatever little impact we can from our end. So keep joining and keep tuning on every Friday, as we have even more interesting stories coming up, and we promise we will not let you down. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Janisha. I will see you super soon.
Bye. Thank you.